It's terrible. I, you know, it's a very bad foreign policy decision. It looks horrible. I do think it reflects very poorly on our current and past president and their ability to work and negotiate and come up with a really good strategy in the Middle East. You really need people on the genius level to come up with a really good strategy for the Middle East. Right now, we don't have that, you know. I mean, I'm not really sure what the president's intention is going forward. It looks like we're going to need more troops. That's pretty much, I was actually on the military base today for various reasons, and everybody was just talking here on the military base about how many more people are getting ready to get sent to Afghanistan. So the idea of the US withdrawing from Afghanistan, I actually foresee us, getting more involved. I do not see a complete withdrawal even being possible at this time. We have to send more troops over there right now. So I'm not sure, we definitely need to come up with a better foreign policy moving forward. Again, it's what this class is about, ethics around the globe. What kind of standard of morality is being upheld in Afghanistan? What kind of standard of morality is being followed by the Taliban? What is the belief system on the part of our military? What was the belief system under, George W. Bush when he had the U.S. invade Afghanistan and start sending troops over there? And now that we've killed Osama bin Laden, he is the person who took responsibility for 9/11. The question remains is what is the justification for the United States continuing to be in Afghanistan? So that's actually a great way to start our Module 2 live session. So thank you so much for attending the Module 2 live session for the Ethics Around the Globe course. Thank you, Brandy, Melanie, Twanita, Molly, and Amanda for joining me. This meeting will be recorded for the benefit of your classmates who couldn't be here. I thought we would start out by talking about some of the issues that are in the news right now. COVID-19 and the vaccine is clearly a moral dilemma and a question as to whether or not the vaccine should be mandated by employers, should it be mandated by the government, should it be mandated by, health insurance? And then that's the domestic issue that we're facing. And the foreign policy issue is what the United States is doing in Afghanistan. And are we making it worse or better? Any comments on that? So we'll start with this general question. What is our moral justification for being in Afghanistan? Molly, I'll put that out to you. Why should the United States be in Afghanistan? Or why not? And what is our moral reason for being there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think the moral reason for being there is just to keep the people who are there safe.
Okay. So that would be traditionally seen as us policing the world. And that could actually fall into one of our moral theories for this week, which is consequentialism and utilitarianism. Utilitarianism says that the morally correct action minimizes suffering, maximizes pleasure, minimizes harm, maximizes happiness. So, Amanda, do you think that the presence of U.S. soldiers for the last 20 years in Afghanistan has that served utilitarian ethics? What do you think, Melanie? Is it in the best interest of the people in Afghanistan for American soldiers to be there? Or the contractors we have over there, civilians? What is the utilitarian answer? What course of action maximizes the greater good? What do you think, Brandy?
Yes.
Give me a little more. Why? in ethics, it's not the answer so much as the justification, the moral reasoning, and your ability to apply the theory. So the theory that we're working with today is utilitarianism, which says that the morally correct action minimizes suffering. So which course of action would minimize suffering, Brandy?
I believe that if we kept troops there, it would reduce suffering for both countries, ours and theirs.
Yeah, it's certainly I mean, the next step could be us having, really fighting a war against the Taliban, and it could lead to more acts of terror directed at the United States, possibly. Certainly, creating more instability in the Middle East is definitely a bad thing, and having U.S. troops there seem for the last 20 years has seemed to, be a positive peace presence to some extent. Um, let's look at the second moral theory that we're learning this week, which is deontology, which says that morality is a set of universal moral rules that don't have any exception, and that we should always respect and value human life, and that no course of action should ever treat human life as a means to an end, that human life has an inherent value. We should always follow universal moral rules, and along with that is the rule of reversal. The only way something can be moral, Brandy, according to duty-based ethics, is if we do something, the only way it can be considered moral is if it would be moral if the same thing was done to us. So, would it be moral for Afghanistan to maintain troops in the United States? And that would go for any of our interference in global politics, because the United States is very involved in the politics of the Middle East, for example. How would you feel about having Iraqi soldiers here in your hometown? Would you like that? Would you like to have um, the Taliban in your city? Would you like to have soldiers from Afghanistan, Afghani soldiers in your hometown, Brandy?
If it benefited the US positively, yes.
Okay, that would be utilitarian ethics. But now we're going to talk about deontology, and we can only apply this theory for this hypothetical situation. Deontology is not concerned with consequences. Deontology is concerned with universal moral rules. If it is ethical for us to do something, that same thing has to be ethical if it's done to us. Now, I can tell you, I do not want Afghani soldiers marching around my city, my state. I don't want them in the United States, period. I don't want any soldiers from Israel in the United States. I don't want Israel telling the United States what it can do, how to divide up the land, or where who can get what part of the land. This is what we do in the Middle East. But according to duty-based ethics, the role of reversal applies. We don't just get to put up a self-righteous finger and says this is maximizing the greater good. That's utilitarianism. Duty-based ethics requires the course of action to satisfy the rule of reversal. That means if you do it, it can only be moral if it would be moral if it was done to you. It's kind of like the reverse of the golden rule, do unto others. I do not want to have a lot of Afghani soldiers marching around my town. Would you? Anybody? Would you? Is that what you want, Molly? Is there anyone who would like to have this country occupied by foreign soldiers? Nobody really said. Brandy said if it would benefit the greater good. Well, that's utilitarianism. So let's talk about our moral theories, and then we'll get back to some of these pressing ethical dilemmas that you and your generation are going to have to resolve. These domestic and foreign policy issues that are very serious, and instability in the Middle East is nothing new. It probably goes back 5,000 years. So what we're seeing is nothing new. I mean, some people say it was even inevitable that if the United States was ever going to pull out of Afghanistan, this is how it was going to be because that's an unstable country, right? We did the best we could over there, but we can't stay over there forever without a moral justification for staying over there anyway. Let's talk about moral theories, and then we'll come back to some of these questions and talk about other questions that you have when it comes to resolving moral dilemmas using the theories that we're talking about. So first, we just mentioned is Kantian ethics. Immanuel Kant is an Enlightenment philosopher from Germany. For Kant, he believed in universal moral rules. He's not concerned with the consequences of your actions, but the morality of the act itself. For Kant, murder is simply an immoral act. Lying is an immoral act. Stealing is just an immoral act. Suicide is just an immoral act. He's not worried about the consequences. It's just focusing on the act itself. For Kant, we must follow the categorical imperative. What's that? Well, it's a rule according to that which you can at the same time will that it should be a universal moral law. So if a universal moral law is that no country can interfere with the political affairs of another country, would we then, Melanie, be allowed to hang out in Afghanistan? If that's a universal moral rule, that one country may not interfere with the affairs of another country, what would we have to do then, if that's the moral rule? What do you think, Brandy?
I agree with what Melanie said. She said then we cannot be there.
Yes, if that's the moral, if we're going to apply Kantian ethics and the moral rule has to satisfy the rule of reversal. If we're going to stick to moral rules with no exception, that would be moral absolutism. That would mean that, if it's not moral for troops to hang out in the United States, and I can assure you I don't want any here, um, and I'm sure none of us would want that, then it's not moral for us to interfere with what they're doing either. Well, of course, you know, murder would be morally wrong according to Kant because we have to follow universal moral rules. If everyone kills everyone else, society fails. So murder does not also respect the inherent value of human life. So according to Kant, murder would be wrong. But there's murders. The Taliban is killing people in Afghanistan, right? And if we go over there and we stop that, then is it morally justified? So these are not easy questions, and that's why our government should appoint very talented and educated foreign policy people. Condoleezza Rice would be an example, and I'm not saying that I personally like her, but she's certainly someone who has the education and experience to make such decisions. Somebody who serves as Secretary of State would be the person who would be advising the president and giving the president the advice to make and resolve these sort of you know, resolve these moral dilemmas in a way that is ethical, right? If there is an ethical course of action in Afghanistan, it's not going to be an easy one to chart out. And it really does require some highly educated people inexperienced people to be involved and people who have the ability to negotiate and so forth. Well, let's talk about this other moral theory, which is a form of consequentialism, and that's Jeremy Bentham's utilitarianism. And we're going to go forward. There's a picture of Jeremy Bentham. Utilitarianism says that the morally right action is the one that produces the most favorable balance of good over evil, everyone considered. So I'm going to ask Melanie again. What is the correct course of action in Afghanistan? What should the United States do? Since we're the ones who are policing the world, what is it that we need to do in Afghanistan according to utilitarianism? What should we do going forward? Any thoughts on that, Juanita? The right action maximizes the good, however good is defined. How would you, go ahead, Juanita, how would you define good in Afghanistan? What would a good day look like?
I'm not too political, but according to utilitarianism, um, the most favorable balance of good over evil would be for United States to stay there, to police the world, the third world countries and the countries that can't do it by themselves, according to
Good.
utilitarianism.
Yes. And I definitely feel like that's what prior administrations felt, and that's why we've been there for 20 years. And it's very hard for me to believe that we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 because I was, standing in class just as I am now on that day. We didn't really have a lecture on 9/11. Instead, we just turned the TV on and watched the news, and then I let everybody leave early. And it's hard for me to believe that 20 years have gone by and we still haven't resolved the problems there. But it's easy to understand if looking at the history of the Middle East, and we will talk about that more, as we get more into global ethics, which is what this course is about. We'll look more at the history of the Middle East, and we'll understand why there's been so many problems in the Middle East. But certainly, utilitarianism says that the morally correct action maximizes the good, however good is defined, better than any alternative everyone considered. Everyone affected by an action must be included in any proper calculation of overall consequences. So, some people are saying, what about the American taxpayer? Should the happiness of the American taxpayer be taken into consideration when we're talking about, possibly spending $1 billion a year in Afghanistan? How is that what's morally correct for taxpayers here? That every day I go to work is to pay for a war in Afghanistan, because everyone must be included in any proper calculation of overall consequences. So is it fair for American taxpayers, given that the federal government just passed a bill for infrastructure? We need to rebuild infrastructure. So our money could be going to rebuild infrastructure. Instead, again, I get up every day to pay for a war in Afghanistan. I mean, that's not the only reason, but that's one of the things that we do every day. Anybody that's working right now, every day you go to work is to pay for that war in Afghanistan, to continue to pay for American soldiers to be in Afghanistan, which cost, I mean, upwards $100,000 per soldier just to be over there. It is not cheap. It is I mean, it's more than $100,000 per soldier just to have one soldier over there. It costs a lot of money. So every day we get up and go to work and pay for that. Let's see what's being said in the chat box about that. Let me see if I can open my chat. Brandy said it's not fair. Yeah, I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy about U.S. foreign policy, period. I don't believe that it's working. It's just not working. And I think that's how we got to this point. I think part of President Trump's platform was that, look, the situation in Afghanistan is not working. We've been there for 20 years. We need to get out. So yeah, it is. Yeah, if you just look at it from the perspective of the American taxpayer, I mean, we have to pay for global police, you know. Maybe that results in more peace for us though, right? Maybe having trying to maintain the balance of power, that's really what it's about. The main spheres of influence and maintaining a balance of power in Afghanistan, maybe that benefits us, rather than, you know, possibly being having a war that might involve that we might have to fight over here, acts of terror that can be directed by people in Afghanistan, directed at the United States versus keeping the war over there. That was certainly part of the strategy when we went and we invaded Iraq and we went into Afghanistan 20 years ago. Part of the strategy was, you know, let's fight the war over there and not have it fought over here. So, yeah, it's not an easy question to answer, and it's definitely going to depend on what moral theory you apply. Let's switch gears. So, what is the moral dilemma that is affecting the United States right now, Tonita? What's happening here at home?
COVID.
Yes, so there is a question about the morality of the COVID restrictions, right? Not even talking about the vaccine, it is the businesses, the restrictions on businesses, the social distancing, the closures that we've experienced over the last year and a half, um, the other requirements and the mask requirement, right? Certain Americans feeling like there is some inherent constitutional right to be mask free. Trust me, I studied constitutional law for many years in college. There's nothing in the Constitution that says we have a right to be mask free. Not a thing. We have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Um, but the states have a right to legislate to protect the health, welfare, and safety of people that live within the states. That's why it's become a states issue. This state says this, that state says that, you know, which could be problematic in many situations. But that's why we're looking at states. Well, what is this state doing? What is that governor doing? Because the Constitution says that each state has the right to regulate the health, safety, and welfare of the people within that state. So, Tuanita, how do you think your state is doing when it comes to COVID-19?
Um, our governor is Pritzker. Um, and I think I mean, I really feel like it's kind of like trial and error. Everybody is kind of learning as we go, down to the scientists. Um, Ultimately, we still have measures in place, safety measures. The masks are they're not mandatory no more if you're vaccinated. But they're suggesting that you still wear the mask in closed places like restaurants and things like that. Um, I think, I think our state isn't being ridiculous about it. But
Okay, seems reasonable.
yeah,
What state are you in?
Illinois.
Oh, okay, great. Brandy, what do you think about how your state is carrying out the COVID restrictions?
Well, I live in New York State, so not I don't agree with a lot of things that our governor did. We're going through a lot right now. Our governor is resigning. Um, Last I knew, it was like 14 days. I don't know how many days we got left before he resigns.
Oh
Um,
dear.
yeah, there's a whole lot going on over here. He he was accused of sexually assaulting women within office. Um, and that's being investigated, but he finally agreed to resign and step down until everything is taken care of. Uh, but I do agree, like as far as COVID, there's a lot of things that he could have and should have done differently for his people.
What would be an example of something he should have done differently, just off the top of your head?
Um, I think the biggest thing that we had was the nursing home hitch. He was sending people to nursing homes and they were dying. That we COVID was bad in our nursing homes. He shouldn't have sent people there. I know that they needed to go somewhere, but that wasn't the answer.
Yeah, that's a great, yeah, you again, utilitarianism, right? So utilitarianism is a form of consequentialism. So how do we know if an act was ethical? Well, what were the consequences? And he sent people to nursing homes and they died, right?
Right.
So that's not a good consequence. So according to utilitarianism, that's not a good action because utilitarianism is a form of consequentialism. And this will be part of your module 2 assignment. There are several consequentialist theories, each differing on who is to benefit from the goods or what kind of goods we're pursuing. Two theories have received the most attention from moral philosophers are utilitarianism and ethical egoism. Ethical egoism says, do what is best for you, which action will have the best set of consequences for you. Now, do you think that the governor resigning in the midst of these sexual misconduct allegations, was that ethical egoism?
Yes.
Or was it done in the best interest of the people of the state of New York who wouldn't have to be dragged through it?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. Like he made the right decision to step down because his people we wanted him to, but he knew that that was the right thing to do until his innocence is proven. I don't think he's innocent. I don't think he's going to come back to office. Um, on the plus side of all of this, New York will have the first female governor ever in history. So I think that that's a benefit for New Yorkers. Women's perspectives are different than male perspectives. And
Yeah,
her
look what
right,
happened in New Zealand. New Zealand's got a female leader, a female prime minister. They knocked out COVID in 1 month. And everybody just obeyed her. She said everybody wears masks for, the certain period of time, and everybody did. And she said everybody gets the vaccine. Everybody got the vaccine, and they've had like one case of COVID per month at the most, right? And that's female leadership.
right. I think with the Delta variant now that's stemming off of COVID, this will tell the American people how good of a governor she's going to be for us. How is she going to handle this?
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
easy to be a governor in times of good when you don't have anything to major to worry about and there's not a pandemic. But how
well,
can you lead during a pandemic? That's a true test of leadership, right?
I mean, in my county, the COVID numbers are rising every single day. So this is going to be a great experience for New Yorkers to see how she's going to handle the rise. Is she going to do a better
Yes.
job than our recent governor? I'm curious how this is going to unfold.
Yes. I agree with you. I think that right now bringing in fresh blood is probably a great idea. To get a new perspective on the pandemic and on the problems. I think it is a really good idea to bring in a new person. Now, let's talk about the morality of the vaccine. Is it morally correct for the government to force everyone to be vaccinated who does not have a medical reason to not be vaccinated? Is that morally correct? Let's start with consequentialism. Let's go to utilitarianism. If the government were to require and make it mandatory that you be vaccinated, would that lead to the greater good? Would that save lives? What do you think? Any thoughts on that, Molly? A mandatory vaccine. I don't know. When I was a kid, back in the 70s, there was no controversy. You just got your vaccines and you had a vaccine card and you took that to school. And if you didn't have the vaccine card, you couldn't start school. It was the same way when I went to college as well. When I went to college, we had to show a vaccine card. You've been vaccinated against polio, diphtheria, tetanus, you've had your tetanus shot. There was no controversy because it wasn't political. It was just seen as something that everybody does as a matter of course and as a matter of safety. You just show your vaccine card. I'm trying to understand why it's become political all of a sudden, because it was never political in the 70s and 80s. You just got vaccinated and everybody went about their business. So, what do you think about it, Molly? Would it be morally correct for the government to require everyone to be vaccinated?
No, I think it should be up to the person whether or not they want to get the vaccine or not.
Okay, well, let's look from utilitarian ethics. Utilitarian ethics says that the morally correct action maximizes the good. What would be the what would give us the best consequences against COVID? Just looking at basic science, right? Basic science says the more people you have vaccinated, the less people are going to die or require ventilators or require hospitalization. So forget about any belief in a natural right to your own body, and just look at utilitarianism. The morally right action is the one that produces the most favorable balance of good over evil. Just the consequence. Any thoughts about that, Brandy? I mean, what would utilitarian ethics require us to do with the vaccine?
I think with the vaccine, I mean, I know people that are vaccinated that still have gotten COVID. So, my personal opinion, yes, the shot is a good idea because it's helping people not get sick. But at the same time, people are still getting sick with COVID.
Right. But scientifically, it's less severe, right? If you have the
Right.
vaccine, you'll only have a mild case and you won't be laying up in a hospital with a ventilator about to die. One of the
Correct.
reasons why that's important for utilitarianism is I can tell you here in Las Vegas, I've had family members who were ill for years, and the hospitals here are overcrowded and have been for years. So way before COVID, the majority of the hospitals in Nevada were already under a tremendous strain. So they were already using makeshift rooms. There was already overcrowded ERs where you had to wait for 24 hours to see a doctor. So one of the considerations under utilitarianism, this has nothing to do with individual rights. We're not looking at that. We're simply looking at whether we can apply utilitarian ethics to help us resolve an issue objectively. So again, having more people require serious resources from a hospital means that other people who need life saving procedures will not be able to be treated because the hospitals are already over or overflowing, understaffed, nurses are tired. So again, not having people vaccinated, one, allows the virus to then continue to mutate. When the way that biology works is the mutation is a part of natural selection that helps the virus survive. So for this virus to survive, it has to get smarter and it has to find a way to continue to transmit. And the only way it can keep doing that is if you've got a significant number of people who are unvaccinated who can continue to carry, transmit, and spread it more than the vaccinated people. So utilitarianism is really a numbers game. It's reducing suffering and maximizing pleasure. It's not about my individual right to self-determination of whether or not I want a medical procedure. It's only about looking at the group, what leads to the maximization of the greater good, considering healthcare workers, nurses, shortage of nurses, shortage of doctors, shortage of beds. There hasn't been enough investment in healthcare in our country. So we don't have enough hospitals. We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough beds. We don't have enough ventilators. So people cannot really be cavalier and say I don't want to get the vaccine without considering the fact that we live in this thing called a society, right? And under utilitarian ethics, We're looking at the morally correct action being the one that produces the most favorable balance of good over evil. It's not about my right to self-determination, which obviously we all recognize that. So, do you think it's appropriate to even apply utilitarian ethics to the COVID situation? Juanita, is this a valid moral theory?
Yeah, it's definitely valid because we're dealing with the mass. We're dealing with the entire nation. The entire nation, like not just the country or continent, but this is something that's affected globally. We're affected globally by this virus. So it's definitely appropriate because we got to figure out what's best for everyone, what gives the
Right.
best results for everybody.
Yeah, that's the problem. If I decide not to get vaccinated and then I go somewhere, that affects everybody else. It's not just me making an individual decision, it's just my own self-determination. And again, there is no constitutional right to be unvaccinated. There's no constitutional right to be unmasked. Okay. I don't know who told somebody that, but that's not in the Constitution, nor is it in the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Constitution. So no judge is going to say that there is a right to be mask free because there really is not. So we do live in a society. No human being's an island. I wish we were. We could all be off on our own little islands and we wouldn't have to worry about COVID. If I had $1 million, that's all it takes. You can buy your own island, move out there with your own family, and then you just wouldn't need vaccines or need to mask or anything because you got your own island. You're good to go. But unfortunately, we live in cities and it's a communicable disease. That means it's transmitted from human being to human being, and not wearing the mask is one of the main ways it's transmitted. And the vaccines reduce transmission and reduce the amount of time that you are going to be sick and reduce the likelihood of hospitalization in the event that you get the horrible, horrible Delta variant, which I hope none of us get. So that's how you could apply utilitarian ethics to get all of the emotion out of it and try to make a well-reasoned decision, right? Because when I listen to people talk about, why they don't want to wear a mask or why they don't want to get vaccinated, I hear fear, right? We talked about emotivism in module 1. As a woman myself, I know I am moody sometimes. Certain times of the month, I'm even more moody. And that time of the month would not be a good time for me to make a rational decision because I'm too moody. And when you make decisions based on emotion, that often doesn't work, right? So it's part of learning moral theory is trying to find an objective, unbiased way to make a rational, working decision that will benefit you and the rest of society. Because unfortunately, we're not living on our own island. If we did, we would be so perfect. But this is a communicable disease, and as a society, utilitarianism might require a certain course of action. So that's just one way of analyzing it. Let's go to deontology, duty-based ethics, which is Immanuel Kant. Duty-based ethics says that we have to act in accordance with universal moral laws. You can't kill, you can't steal, and you can't lie. The morally right action is done in accordance with the categorical imperative. And when you're making a decision based on deontology, you're not looking at the consequence, it's simply the act. And there's when you would consider the party's rights and duties. So, Melanie, what is my individual right when it comes to wearing a mask or getting vaccinated? What is my individual right? Any thoughts on that, Molly? What is my individual right? What would most state governors say is my individual right? Is there a law that says I have to wear a mask all the time?
Sorry, what was the question? I'm busy at
Okay.
work right now.
Yeah, so we've left the land of utilitarianism and we're going to apply deontological ethics to the question of COVID-based restrictions and remedies. So the remedies would include the mask, the social distancing, the vaccine. So what would Kantian ethics say about my rights and duties as it applies to these COVID measures?
I
What are
think
my rights?
that everyone should get the vaccine.
Well, I don't think that there's definitely no law that says I have to be vaccinated. So when we're looking at Kantian ethics, we have to look at the party's inherent rights and duties. We have to consider universal moral laws. I don't, where do we get our rights from? Well, there are natural rights, right? You know, and then the Constitution that says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Um, I do not know that there is a law that says I have to be vaccinated, right? There is no law that says I have to be vaccinated. So
So it would be that everyone can try to decide for themselves whether or not they want to get it. But
I believe so. I actually see Kantian ethics because it's focused on the morality of your action. In that instance, I think Kantian ethics could justify people saying, I don't want to wear a mask, I don't want to get vaccinated, because it's based on your duties and your rights. And there is a right to self determination, there's a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Can the government infringe on that? Yes, absolutely. But I don't think there's no law that says I have to get vaccinated, right? The only
right,
time vaccines become moral is when you look at the consequence, right? You look at what happens if you don't get vaccinated. Have you ever seen a picture of a child who had polio versus a child that was not vaccinated, or a child who had smallpox versus one who was not? Let me see if I can open that up. Let me share my web browser. Share your web browser. One of the important things is when you're trying to resolve a moral dilemma and you decide which moral theory that you're going to apply, it's really going to be coming down to the facts. What are the facts and how do you apply them? Let's look at a child who has been vaccinated versus one that hasn't. Here we go. There's the image I was looking for. Can everybody see that? See if I can make it bigger.
Yes.
Let me give it a chance to come up. So the first child has not been vaccinated, okay? The second child was vaccinated with the smallpox vaccine. Vaccines are not anything new. They've been around for 250 years. Now let's go back to utilitarianism. What led to the morally correct consequence here? Getting vaccinated or not getting vaccinated? This is without the vaccine, that's with the vaccine. Which one do you want to be your child?
My children are fully vaccinated except for the COVID vaccine. I'm still on the fence about that.
Well, in my opinion, not enough research has been done about the effects on children. I
Agreed.
don't, I, that's just from a purely what I would call empirical, observational, not even me making an opinion one way or the other. I don't see a lot of studies about the effects on children, especially anything long term. And it's really disappointing because by now, scientists should have done those studies, that information should be out for parents to see, you know, what's the effect. I mean, at least a year, right? We've had it, there's at least a year for them to say that we've done the studies and this is how it's going to impact children. I don't see that information. But at least with smallpox, we do know, you know, what happens here.
I do agree, like with the COVID vaccine, I mean, they've had it for adults for a while, and that, scientists should know, you know, for children, what are we going to do so that everyone can be protected? The problem
Yeah.
is they don't know enough about COVID to develop a vaccine that is safe for everyone. They came up with a vaccine in such little time. I'm not personally, I'm not doing it. If that means I have to wear a mask everywhere I go and my children have to wear a mask everywhere we go, that's what I'll do until they can give me enough information on the vaccine for me to make a definite decision.
I mean, I live here in Nevada. We have to wear the vaccine. You have to wear the mask when you go somewhere, whether you're vaccinated or not.
See, we don't have
Anybody,
to here. They lifted our mask mandate, except for medical facilities, is the only time we have to wear one.
yeah,
In,
here you
in
pretty
New
much
York
have
State.
to wear it everywhere. And if you want to go into a business, it doesn't matter whether you're vaccinated or not, you have to wear the mask. All employees in the state of Nevada, if you're an employee, you have to wear the mask.
I believe
So,
employees have to here, but the general public, we don't have to. They lifted the mask mandate for everyone,
yeah.
whether we're vaccinated or not.
Yeah, ours was lifted, but I mean, you can't go into because a private business, if you're on somebody's property, they can make the rules. So you can't go into any business here without the mask on, whether you're vaccinated or not. So, and the governor is getting ready to issue another mandate where everybody has to wear the mask all the time anyway. So whether you're vaccinated or not in Nevada, you still have to wear the mask.
Right. I agree. I think that New York State, I think our governor should not have lifted the mask mandate when he did. It should have been slow because our numbers are now rising again. We were doing so good with no numbers, and now they're skyrocketing because nobody's
That's
wearing masks.
Yes, that's the proof of scientific empiricism. Aristotle was probably the first true empiricist, which basically says that observational truth can be seen in science when you observe what happens in nature. And what happens in nature is when people wear the mask, there's a much lower transmission rate. When people don't wear the mask, there's a much higher transmission rate. That's not how, because of what I feel or what I believe. That's simply observational science, right? And under no circumstances should a mask or a vaccine ever be political, right? To me, that's morally wrong. Is making a vaccine it's not political. It's about, you know, self-determination. It's about freedom, your human rights, and it's public safety. I understand those are concerns, but to me, a vaccine should never be political. It's something as a result. It's been developed as a result of science, and the reason it was developed so quickly is because SARS was a coronavirus, and a vaccine was found for that 10 years ago. President Obama invested a lot of money into messenger RNA research. So scientists have already been looking at vaccines for coronaviruses, which are known as bat viruses, for a very long time. So all they had to do was tweak something that they already had in the lab, and that became the COVID-19 vaccine. So scientists were not just hanging out, you know, chilling and chit chatting on their phones and, you know, hanging out. No, they were already in the lab staring at messenger RNA technology and staring at the coronavirus, and they were already staring at vaccines. So when COVID-19 broke in 2019, all they had to do was take the research that they already had and just tweak that and come up with a new vaccine. So that's why people are like, oh, it happened so fast. It really didn't happen very fast. It's that we were already on the cutting edge of having, you know, 500 different, I believe it was 500 different vaccines were already ready, and it was just a question of tweaking it to see which ones would be the most effective. um So, it remains a moral dilemma, and it seems to be causing a lot of tension, in society. Have you felt any of that? Have any of y'all felt any tension between family members and friends who feel differently about the vaccine, or they don't want people coming to their house without the vaccine? I have friends that they don't want anybody coming to their house without the vaccine, and then I have friends who are never going to wear a mask ever. Have any of you experienced that in terms of family gatherings, birthday parties, the holidays? Have those changed at all for you because of COVID-19?
I have my grandparents didn't want to be or have any of the family over until they were vaccinated, and then most of us were vaccinated.
Yes. Good. Yeah, I knew it wasn't just me. I've definitely have friends that if you're not vaccinated, you're not coming in their house. And then I got friends that are never going to get the vaccine. I mean, unless it's become mandatory. Okay, so that brings us to the next question, which is now Carnival Cruise Line says you're not going to be able to come aboard their cruise ship without proof of your vaccination, right? Is that the morally correct action? Should businesses be allowed to, like airlines, should airlines say you're not going to fly on our airplane without proof of vaccination? Or, should the airport be doing COVID tests at the airport as part of a security background check? I mean, they could probably do the test and get the results back in what, an hour or two, that you would just hang out at the airport and wait. And once it's been proven that you've been vaccinated and or you test negative, your swab comes up negative at the airport, then you fly. What do you think about that? I mean, is that what's coming in the future? Is that moral to require vaccine cards for people who want to travel? What do you think, Twanita? Should a vaccine card be your ticket of admission now to concerts? New York City is requiring, right? You can't dine, right, in certain restaurants in New York City unless you have your vaccine card. Should that be the ticket to admission now for a cruise, for an airport, for a concert, anywhere where people will be in a situation where a communicable disease could be spread? Should the vaccine card be your ticket to admission?
I feel like yes, it should be either the car or, like you said, on the spot COVID testing. Because again, it's not about just one person. And I kind of think of it like just like with TSA, if you're going through the airport. Sometimes I used to get so upset, like, what's the holdup and why are you stopping me? And at the end of the day, it's for my own protection as well. Because if you're not checking everybody thoroughly and then somebody get on the plane and decide to hijack it, now I'm gonna be looking crazy like, oh man, they didn't check everybody good enough. So same difference with the COVID. And everybody have their own, their own idea of what it is. Some people go on with all of these conspiracy theories and all of this stuff. I feel like I work in the medical field, so I stick strictly to the science. And like I said in the first question that you asked me, it is still trial and error, true enough. However, it'll do more harm if people aren't getting vaccinated or if people aren't wearing their mask versus get vaccinated. Okay, if you still catch COVID, okay, we tried. So, yeah, to answer your question, I do think, especially when it's such a crowd or tight spaces like an airplane where you can't distance yourself 6 to 10 feet away from anybody. Yeah, I feel like a vaccination card or a negative test should be displayed.
Okay, good. Yes, utilitarianism again, and part of it is protecting the business, right? Why would Carnival Cruise Line want to be in a situation like we were in 2 years ago, where we've got all these cruise ships that have been to Mexico and other foreign countries that are now set to head back to the United States? And now we have people testing positive on the cruise ships. We've got employees on the cruise ships testing positive, people sick at sea. Why should the why should the cruise line open itself up to a whole lot of liability when instead they could simply check the vaccine cards, do a COVID test for everybody, and then if everybody is negative and or you got your vaccine card, now you can ride our cruise line. It serves utilitarian interest for that to be done. So, food for thought, but at least this shows you how you could apply some objective moral theories to resolve situations as opposed to all of this whining and hysteria that we see in the media, which is simply emotivism. It's nothing but raging emotions. Let's talk about our Module 2 assignments, shall we?
Before we move on,
Yes.
I do agree with what Melanie said in the chat. She said, I don't believe it should be mandatory to have a vaccine card, but it should be mandatory to be tested for COVID and have a negative test result. I agree with her. Because even if someone is vaccinated, that doesn't mean that you're not going to spread the virus still. The
Yes,
only
it's
purpose
just
of the vaccine is to lessen the symptoms of COVID so that you don't end up in the hospital with it. You're still going to transmit that virus regardless if you're vaccinated or not. I don't think a vaccination card is the answer for concerts and flights. There should still be a negative COVID test before you can board a plane with 100 other people or go to a concert with thousands of other people.
Yes, it definitely seems like what our nation is doing right now is not working. So, stricter, more consistent measures will be needed, and more creative thinking, definitely. Because, I mean, I think all of us can agree that the approach we have now is not giving us the optimal results since the virus is still spreading out of control, right? We do need some creative people like yourself who are smart and talented to come up with some better solutions. And hey, in one of my classes, American government, there was an assignment where the students had to write their senator or their member of Congress and say, here's what needs to be fixed. And you'd be surprised. I would say 50 to 60% of those letters were answered by that senator or that person in Congress saying, hey, I hear you, I see you, I agree with you. And so you actually, as a citizen of this country and as a college student, you're in the driver's seat. If you think something needs to be changed, feel free to go out and change it. You are empowered to do so because thus far, we don't have the complete answer when it comes to COVID. We haven't got it all figured out just yet. So, any other comments? This was a great discussion, and thank you all for your participation. I think it really helps when you talk about, a current event situation. It shows you, the moral dilemmas and the difficulty in trying to resolve anything. And one of the reasons goes back to just human psychology. Anything that we believe is all twisted through the lens of our own subconscious. Our own subconscious is filled with our own personal experiences, our own biases, our own perceptions. I'm left-handed. The way I see things is very different just for the mere fact that I'm left-handed. I'm totally wired to work and see things differently. I'm mostly in my right brain because that's just how the body is set up. And that twists and warps and it changes my perceptions. And that's why you could have two people go into the same movie and they come out of the movie and one person says, oh, that was great. The other person says, I hated that movie. Because everything that you see, believe, and what you perceive in your belief system is all based on partially on what is in your subconscious mind, which is based on your own personal experiences and your own biases in your belief system. So it's just great that we can talk about these issues and hopefully we'll see some better ethical decisions coming out of our leaders on these topics. Any questions or comments before we move on to our Module 2 assignments? So Module 2 introduces you to this course project. In the course project, it's a scenario where you're attending a diversity job fair. And for the first part of the course project paper, which is this week, you will be required to prepare an FAQ sheet, a frequently asked questions. If you want to know what one looks like, you can hop on the internet. They're all over the place. Basically, it's a list of questions and answers. You should be sure to include an APA title page, in-text citations, and a list of references. For your FAQ sheet, you'll be answering the following questions. 1, what are ethics? 2, why do ethics vary from person to person? 3, what are the key features of consequentialist theories? 4, what are the key features of utilitarianism? 5, what are the key features of ethical egoism? And 6, what are the differences between utilitarianism and ethical egoism? So it's not a very difficult assignment if you just simply go in order and answer each question. Cite to the textbook or some other reliable source for where you get the definition of consequentialism, utilitarianism, and be sure to write in complete sentences. This is not a tweet. This is not a, direct message or a text message. This is an essay for a college course. So be sure to run it through Grammarly if you need to, proofread it, run the editor in Microsoft Word to spell check it, and it's due Sunday, August 22nd. References are required because you and I did not invent utilitarianism or ethical egoism. So we need to give credit to the author of ideas. This should be approximately 2-page paper. Here's the scoring rubric for it. You get 5 questions for answering each question, 5 points for answering each question. And then down here, number 7, the document is organized in the FAQ format, contains proper grammar, spelling, and punctuation. Criterion 8, the document complies with the APA format, includes in-text citations and a list of references. So that's worth 10 points. So please be sure to follow the APA format. Is there anyone who has questions about the APA format or how it works? Great. Okay, as usual, there is a discussion forum active in Module 2. It's asking you if there was a time when you ever had to use ethical egoism to resolve a moral dilemma. So just please be sure to make that original post in your reply post by Saturday. The Module 2 discussion forum will end on Sunday. So go ahead and make those 2 posts in there. And then to get credit for the Module 2 live session, please submit the correct answer to the question, which is what is the categorical imperative according to Immanuel Kant? You could Google this and get the answer off Google. You could use the slide in this presentation where we talked about the categorical imperative. Just please be sure to submit your correct answer by Sunday, August 22nd. Anything else on your mind? Any other moral dilemmas that you want to talk about? What else is happening in the world? Okay, well, if there's nothing else, thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Molly. And thank you, Twanita, for taking the time to attend the Module 2 live session. I will see all of you in cyberspace. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me or send me a text message and I will answer right away. Thank you so much. Bye, Brandy. Bye, Amanda. Bye, Melanie.